Hello, good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm sure that, first of all, for those who do not know about your organization, I mean, what is Global Info Analytics?
Global Info Analytics is a market research and data company. We do market research, public opinions, and also we do political risk forecasting for investors.
How long have you been doing this?
We've been doing this for the past, I think, almost 5 years now. 2019, March, we were set up.
Okay. What are some of the key polls that you have conducted?
In fact, we conducted a poll in the 2020 elections, just days before the elections were held. And we also conducted a poll in the MPP primaries, the last delegate polls. We also conducted a poll on the e-levy before the government went onto a frenzy to engage the public.
Let's look at 2020 elections and the MPP primaries. How did the results of your poll reflect in the actual outcome?
Days before the elections, our polls were indicating that Nanado was going to prevail with 50.4%. Plus or minus 1.9% margin of error. And he got 51.3%.
What about MPP primary?
In the MPP primaries, we said Dr. Mahama was going to get 58.4 plus 1.9% margin of error. That is 60.3 or 60.4, and he got 61.3.
Okay. Now, you have released the results of the latest poll that you conducted, and there are different angles to it. I'm sure that you've seen today's edition of the Daily Graphic, where the issues of what voters prioritize, economy, roads, jobs, and others, has come up. And then you're supposed to be on a panel, according to the story, you're on a panel with Dr. Rashid Pelpo and Mr. Richard Ayagba of the NDC and MPP respectively. And Mr. Ayagba disputed the results of your research. He says it did not reflect the reality of how Ghanaians felt about the MPP-led administration. Quote, I have a problem with the poll itself. The measurements we are dealing with, I don't have confidence in it. It is something that should be taken on its face value, but not a representative feeling of the people. Because of the research itself, I don't think it gives us a clear picture of people's views presently in the country. And he says the methodology used by your institution for the research was problematic and did not allow respondents to give a clear impression of the direction of the country. And we also have seen a presser by the campaign team of Dr. Bawumia, and they say that your survey appears incomplete and fails to provide adequate insights into the electorate's opinions. And they indicate deficiencies in your methodology and execution. Quote, there is not a single organization that is an authority over electoral polling, and we have about 4 to 6 of them that we work with. And unfortunately, this particular poll you reference is one that we have never received the indices that they use. We don't have much that we can do about that particular one because it doesn't tell us much and looks scanty and really doesn't tell of a polling that was done properly. First of all, can you take us through your methodology and execution and then address these concerns as well?
All right, thank you very much for having me. Global Info Analytics, people can testify, is the only polling company in Ghana that has ever produced its research methodology well in advance before the polls are conducted. We also publish our research instrument or survey instrument well in advance for all to see the kind of questions we ask, whether they are leading or misleading questions. And then also, we are the only ones that tell everybody where the polls will be conducted throughout the country. We, in fact, provide the constituencies, and indeed, those who contact us, we are able to tell them which electoral area we're going to go to. All is done in transparent way. In terms of methodology, it is very important that we understand that the sampling size or the sample size is the fundamental data that has to be resolved from the beginning. And how do we calculate the sample size? It is mathematical. It's not by intuition or somebody's imagination. Now, if you take the sampling that we use, 6,128, it is the result or the product of using 18.5 million voters as a variable, and also picking 1.66% as our margin of error for this survey, and then a confidence level of 99%. When you run this input into a formula, you'll get the 6,128. So the issue of this sample inadequacy is resolved through mathematics. And secondly, once we decide on the national sample, we then allocate this national sample to each of the regions based on its contribution to the National Register of Voters. In effect, we are weighting the sample to represent the people who vote from that region. Once we are done with the regional sample allocation, we then go to the constituencies. We have a simulator, an inbuilt simulator that takes the number of areas we want to go to randomly without any human interference. We want to avoid the tendency of us picking areas we may feel, oh, we have to go here or go there. So it is done entirely random by a computer. Once we've selected the areas we want to go to from all the regions, then we allocate the sample size for each region to those constituencies for that region based again on the weight of that constituency relative to the rest. So it is weighted. And then when we go to the ground, we also pick electoral areas that we are going to poll. If we are doing a sample below 50 interviews, we go to one electoral area and do the sample in that electoral area. If we are doing between 50 and 100, we go to at least 2 electoral areas that will be picked randomly to visit. And then again, the samples are weighted based on the contribution of that electoral area to all the electoral areas in the constituency. If we are doing over 100 and up to 150 interviews, we go to at least 3 electoral areas. Again, the sampling are measured or distributed in that manner. And then when we hit the floor or we hit the ground, we stand at junctions where everyone has a chance of being interviewed. Junctions, car park, markets, workplaces, and interview people randomly we see on the street. We don't pre-select anybody before we interview them. And then the interviews are conducted using devices, tablets, phones, and the rest. So we are able to see real-time data, the information that is coming through. And that is also equipped with GPS. So we can tell exactly where each officer is standing. If you go to a place you're not supposed to go to, we will see from the GPS location, and we'll call you and fix that problem. So we have built in several steps to ensure that data is valid, it represents the people we are going to engage, and that there's no biases in the data. And again, we don't interview groups of people. Even if we meet a group of people sitting, we only pick one person from that group and interview that person and go somewhere else and continue with the work, just to ensure that we're not picking group thinking in the polls. So as far as we are concerned, I think we've done a lot to ensure that our sample or our sampling is scientific, is rigor, and methodology is always being refined as we go along. There's no single methodology that is perfect for all. As time goes on, it is refined. So this is what we have done to deal with the issue of sampling and methodology. With the issue that have been raised as the views not representing those of Ghanaians, this morning we have published 3 data, and those data point to time sets in the history of this country. We have produced a data about voters' view about the direction of the country, about their standard of living, and who they intend to vote for. What we are telling people that at each point of this data set, we could tell you what happened in the country. For example, in January 2022, all was well. And then in April 2022, e-levy was passed. And you can see the reaction of voters when the e-levy was passed. Those who think the country was headed in the wrong direction went up. Those who think lifestyle was getting harder went up. It went up and up and up, depending upon the situation we found ourselves in. And then if you remember, October 2022, thereabout, the cedi made a stunning remarkable recovery against the major currencies. And at that point, people's views about where we're headed and their standard of living changed and responded positively to those indices that was happening in the country. And if you watch the who do you intend to vote for, Don Mahama's performance moves in the same direction as the rest of the country, who said it's very badly headed, or those who think that the country's the standard of living is getting worse. So you can see a relation between these three leaders. If the data actually reflects the grounds, believe me, they will not move in the same direction. This is the scientific way of seeing whether the data reflects the true reality or just somebody's imagination. And then again, as data, those who work with data, if your sampling is not rigorous, it's not very representative, the curve you have every time will be going up, down, up, down, up, down. It will be doing zigzag. If you check our chart, they are smooth. It means that the sampling is accurate, methodology is sound and consistent, and that it will only produce such results if a lot has gone in to deliver that kind of report.
Now, so let me just ask you this. One of the issues that was also raised had to do with the questionnaire, the way some of the questions are structured, and they say that it did not allow respondents to give a clear impression of the direction of the country. Have you heard of this critique?
All right, Randy, we ask close-ended questions, and our questions are direct and straight. The party should not expect us to do all their work for them. We give them a lead, and you as a researcher, you cannot cover every hypothesis in a survey.
True.
But you provide a guide that allows somebody else to take a further step to probe those issues further. On the issue of the type of question, if you read our questionnaire, you will see that it is absolutely clear that there is no ambiguity in it. Now, the only question we find sometimes troubling for people is when we ask them about the direction of the country. Mm-hmm. In that instance, our field officers are trained not to give negative or positive examples, but that could lead voters to give a misleading answer, or they might think you want certain positive answer. So what we do ask them in that instance is that in terms of the direction of the country, when you see everything going on in this country in its totality, from education, health, economy, jobs, what have you, do you believe that the country is headed in the right direction or wrong direction? We don't give any hint of whether we want a positive or negative feedback, because we are aware that will lead to people giving us something that they don't necessarily believe in. And I think that is the only question that we really think we have to provide those kind of examples to guide people. The rest of them are quite straightforward and simple questions.
Okay. Now, Musa, let me ask you something which has to do with stakeholder relations. Obviously, you would consider the political parties, you consider civil society, you consider the media as stakeholders in what you do, especially when some of these issues are raised. Some might be on the basis of a misunderstanding, some might be just ignorance, some might be just partisanship or just political talk. But do you engage these stakeholders to explain what your work is about?
Yes, in fact...
and to also get feedback from them.
Yes, let me give you an example. Whenever we want to do any poll on education, and we frame the question, we always consult Edward, my good friend Kofi Asari.
Right.
And Kofi Asari will refine the question for us to make sure that there's no ambiguity in the question, because those ones are policy-driven questions. And we don't want to be caught pants down on that. So we consult some of them at certain points in time, depending on the question we are going to ask. On education, our go-to person is Edward. He can confirm that. But with regard to political parties, look, we don't want to be talking to them at that level, because what we are doing really is for them to use it. And the questionnaire we publish, it is well ahead of the polls. And if they have any questions or issues or concerns, our numbers are there. None of them has ever called us to complain.
Have you ever engaged the political parties?
There are some who have called us to come and do presentation for us on the numbers we've published. Some have refused to call us. But it's okay. So for us, we are doing a service not only to ourselves, because we need that data ourselves to do our work. Because when we are doing the risk forecasting, we need those data. And we cannot mislead our clients by putting out the misleading data. That would be against our very survival as a company.
Now, Musa, let's zero down to your current work, the findings of your current work. What are the key findings and how do they compare to the previous one?
Right. The key findings are around 3 issues. 1, direction of the country. 65% of voters believe Ghana is still headed in the wrong direction. Even though this is a slight improvement from the last period, which was 68%. So a slight drop of 3%. And then those who said their lifestyle or their living standards has gotten worse in the last 12 months is now 51%. It was 54% last time, a slight drop. So you can see the direct relation between the direction of the country and standard of living of people. And then economy, jobs, and education remain top 3 priorities for voters. They say it will be influencing them when they go to the polls. And the top is jobs, followed by economy, and you have education, and then roads, of course. These are the issues that will influence voters. And then when we ask them who they intend to vote, and you see, we do something we call unprompted recall, which those of you who have done marketing know. We want to know the true choice of voters if they were given the chance to vote. So we ask them, if the election were held today, who would you vote for? We don't give them the names or the photos. We want to hear from them what name they will mention, and then our field officers will take the name they have mentioned. It's totally unprompted, natural. So what you see there in the report is a natural response from the 6,128 voters that we interviewed. And on that note, John Mahama is leading with 54% of the vote. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia on 35% roughly of the vote. Alan Chiramatin 7.5%, and Nana Kwambidiaku 2.3% of the vote. Now, the interesting revelation that has come from this poll is a division that we have seen within the MPP ranks and the solid unity of NDC for their own candidate. Roughly 83% of MPP voters intend to vote for Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. For NDC, it is 96%. Now, crucially among floating voters, 59% of them intend to vote for John Mahama. That is staggering. That is an improvement of about 6% from last poll. And then the entrance of Nana Kwambidiaku has also shown that MPP is becoming more vulnerable in their strongholds of Ashanti region and Eastern region, where Kwambidiaku now does 5% of Eastern region. And that is huge. And if you look into the data, about 27% of support for Bediaku comes from Eastern region. More than 15% comes from Ashanti region. And if you take Alan Chiramatin, 27% of all his vote come from Ashanti region. Another 17 or so comes from Eastern region. These are the strongholds of MPP. And that place, the government is on fire.
Now, Musa, I have this text from the flag bearer of the APC, Mr. Hassan Ayariga. You've dealt with some of the issues, but I'll still read his text and then let you respond to it because he's watching. It says, how can you sample 6,125 people's opinion out of 80 million people, 9 months to election, and assume it will be the result of the 2024 general election? It is obvious to get high sample votes from a certain political party in their strongholds. The methodology and timing is wrong because they are discouraging Ghanaians to make bold decisions in the 2024 elections and rather favoring other political parties. This is from Mr. Hassan Yariga.
Yes, I heard him yesterday on TV3 as well, one of the stations. My response to that is that we don't go to anybody's stronghold. We go to areas because in the electoral register of the EC, those are the contributors of the vote. So if elections are held today, those areas will turn out the big numbers. And then also on the question of the sampling size, I think we have proven to you from this discussion that the sample size is not based on opinion, but science of mathematics.
Yes.
And if I want to refer him to one country that has used polling for the past 100 years, it's United States of America. They have 120 million voters. The largest sample I've seen from them, from Emerson polling organization, is 6,000 samples. That is a country with 120 million voters. We have 18.5 million voters. Now, he's concerned that some parties, people may be discouraged from voting other parties. It is not about encouraging or discouraging. It's about letting the public know the views and perception of voters. Without us, or that opinion poll, nobody knows who is thinking about what. And for what we are doing is clearly opening up the governance of this country, making democracy more transparent than it has ever been. It's not our interest to tell someone to vote for anybody.
All right, Musa, I don't know if my panelists have a question for you. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay. They don't have one for you. So, Musa, happy Eid.
Eid Mubarak.
And I wish you the very best. I hope that the discipline and piety of Ramadan will bring you a lot of blessings as well. And I'm hoping to have you in the studio one of these days so we can have a very comprehensive look at the work of Global Info Analytics and also draw some global comparisons just to help people understand the research space much better.
We are always available.
All right. Okay.